Welcome to the Iconic Scholar Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Kessler, co-founder of Scholarnetics 360. Get ready to journey beyond textbooks and learn from healthcare's brightest minds. Each episode is packed with insights and wisdom from industry leaders, uncovering the lessons and experiences that shape their careers. Join us to unlock the secrets to your successful career and discover the innovations shaping healthcare's future. Remember, while we're here to educate and inspire, we are not offering medical advice, just fun, educational, and authentic conversations. Okay, let's begin. Welcome to episode 5 of the Iconic Scholar. This is Andrea Kessler, and we have a wonderful guest, Courtney Labenz, who is a third-year DPT student. And Courtney, I have to admit, I am so grateful that I had a chance to meet you your first year of PT school. Courtney has an amazing background. She was a PTA, or is a PTA, I should say, for 6 years. And she has experience working in school-based pediatrics as well as outpatient orthopedics, which is fantastic background. And she decided to go back into PT school. And I'd like to pick her brain a little bit there, but Courtney, welcome. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience as a PTA. Please feel free to share with the listeners all of your experience, because I know I'm not doing it any justice.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I've been super excited, looking forward to being on your podcast. My journey as a PTA, well, way back in high school, my junior year of high school, I was pretty dead set that I wanted to go into physical therapy. My grandma had Alzheimer's and was in a nursing home, so she got physical therapy through her nursing home, and that's really what started my interest. I thought it was super cool how many leaps and gains she got just in the few months that she was there. So that really sparked my interest to begin with. So I went on and started PTA school at Northeast Community College. It was a fabulous experience. It was in person. It was the whole works. I played volleyball there as well. So it was a super fun experience. Then after I went through PTA school, at my final rotation, I got the job that I'm currently at. So at the clinic that I'm at, they hired me on about halfway through my rotation. I loved it there. They are great people. They offered me, my job was half school-based peds and half outpatient orthopedics, which was two things that I was super interested in, which is why I went to that clinic to begin with. I have been doing that for 6 years now, and it has been just a great ride. I have nothing negative to say about it. I have loved learning everything orthopedic and tying that into kids and learning everything on the kids side as well. After I graduated PTA, just through my clinicals, I fell in love with physical therapy. I went PTA to begin with because I didn't know if I could commit to those 6, 7, 8-ish years PT school. That endeavor was going to, for one, cost and take time. And I didn't know if I had that mental toughness to go through it. After I did my clinicals, fell in love with physical therapy, immediately started in August with my bachelor degree right after I graduated. And I did that through Clarkson College. They offered a bachelor specifically in PTA. So my bachelor degree was right on the track of closing that gap between PTA and PT. And that's exactly what I was looking for. I knew I wanted to head to PT school in the long run. So that's why I chose a program that was PTA specific. So I got a little bit of extra, grade 1 through 4 mobilizations, things that we didn't touch a ton on in PTA school, but things that I technically am allowed to do with my scope of practice. So they definitely closed that gap, and I learned a lot more. So that made my transition then into my DPT program so much easier. I went to PT school open-minded. I went into it fresh, knowing new things, but also having the background that I had. So I went into PT school super excited. I didn't have to, my fear in high school was that I was going to be mentally drained and I wasn't going to be able to make it through that last push of those last 2-3 years, depending on the program that you're in. But this gave me kind of that new light. Being able to work as a PTA and kind of having all that experience made me really see PT school as almost like new research. I could dive deeper into what I already knew. And that is something I have grown to just absolutely love. I took every bit of PT school for what it was worth and asked all the hard questions. And that's what I just love learning. And I still And I still do. So I've taken continuing education courses, throughout my PT school degree. As we learn different semesters, I'm like, oh, I want to know more. So I can use my PTA license. I went back and signed up for classes as a PTA, learn more stuff. Yeah, and can take it right back to the clinic that I'm at every day. So it's been really nice being able to work as PTA and go to PT school. So there's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
I love it. So I was an OT and went to PT school, and I had similar experiences you did because I had that exposure to patient care. And I have to say, that integrated clinical practice really was a benefit. I can remember learning about amputations.
Mm-hmm.
And then, ironically, or if you want to call that ironically, maybe probably not ironic, but uh, coincidentally, I had a patient that had an amputation as an OT. So I was able to really learn as I went in PT school. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
100%.
You said something that was really interesting, though. You said that in your scope of practice, and you practice in Nebraska,
Mm-hmm.
that you can do mobilizations as a PTA. And it's interesting to me how different that is because I'm in Pennsylvania and PTAs, that's not in their scope of practice.
As we dove into that this last kind of semester of DPT school, looking up our scope of practices, there were a variety of things that are definitely different from state to state. I'm in a hybrid PT program, so we have classmates from all over. So it's really fun to compare our scope of practices, and they are all so different. Even, one of my best friends, they're from South Dakota. So even from here, just right across the border, it's different. So it is amazing the things that some of us can do and some can't. But yeah, that wasn't my scope of practice. So it was something I just kind of worked on and tweaked a little bit. Usually that was just kept for the PT and that's what they did. But yeah, I definitely was able to close some of those gaps.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we're in this discussion about different scopes of practice because I wonder if that contributes to some of the insurance reimbursement issues that PTAs are facing. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's a mess, is what I have to say. We advocate. My clinic was able to go talk to our local leadership in January about advocating for those kind of things because our privately owned clinic alone saw like a 22% reduction in PTA rates just in, I can't remember if our stats were a year or 2 years prior, but yeah, 22% reduction rate, which is huge. And PTAs do so much for, like, I know in our clinic, they do so much. They're able to see all the variety of diagnoses and they hop from PT to PT, even though we all practice a little bit different. So it's definitely been super tough. I've been kind of caught in the middle of all of that, which is frustrating, but all we can do is advocate right now and we do the best we can. Luckily, I'm from a smaller town, so we know our leadership well. We know them personally, so we're able to speak with them and they take it to the higher levels, and that's all we can hope for right now.
That advocacy is huge. We need to get our voices out there. And honestly, it's better to do as a group than as an individual. But if all we have is one, we need to still do it. From your experience, because you're kind of like 1 foot in PT, 1 foot in PTA
Yeah.
to some degree.
Yes.
Are you finding that PTs are really supporting PTAs in your region?
I think they love to support PTAs. I know from my private business that I work for that it is becoming tougher. After I transition out of a PTA position, that'll just be one less PTA, I think, in our area, just because those reimbursements, I mean, we want to still treat patients and we want to keep the doors open. So if PT is what we have to do right now, that might be what we have to do. And that's too bad because we love PTAs. We love advocating for them. We just finished a rotation with a PTA student and wish we could hire more. Like we really do. But I suppose we are where we're all right now. So advocacy, that's what we need.
Huge. I agree. And so just full transparency here, Courtney and I reconnected a few months ago because she was talking to somebody and I started pelvic health practice and she was interested in moving in that direction and had investigated continuing education programs with another company that offers pelvic health training. And when she and just for our listeners, because I'm sure there's people out there who are PTAs listening to this, she had represented herself as a PT student interested in taking these courses. And of course, they had restrictions on students taking the course until their third and final year. But then the more we were talking, I think it was like midnight, Courtney. and, and it came to me, I said, oh my gosh, wait, she's a PTA. PTAs can take these courses. And I
Yeah.
messaged you. And anyway, it's
Yeah.
just, you're in such a unique situation, but we do need PTAs to move into even these specialty niches of clinical practice, especially Courtney's, you're in a rural community, Hastings, Nebraska.
Yep.
I'm in a rural community in northern Pennsylvania, and we need more PTs and PTAs to learn about pelvic health, especially. I think men and women, oh, such a need, such a
Yeah.
need. So I guess that would push me into my next question for you is so PT school, and I want to touch on that in a minute, but what is kind of the direction you would like to go?
Oh man, I have thought about this, the whole 2 years that I've been in my didactic work of PT school, that I love what I do. I love outpatient orthopedics and from the wide range that it offers, from little kids breaking their legs to athletes to older adults. I love school-based peds, but I have really, I'm kind of in the age where my friends are having children and I'm learning about, pregnancy and postpartum and the pelvic floor in general, both men and women. And I have just really begun to love it. I have not taken any major continuing education courses for it yet. I've listened to podcasts and I've, followed some influencers, and I think it is super cool. And I would love to dive into that. I wish I had more hours in the day that I could do, all three of those specialties and keep that going in my life. But luckily, pelvic health, is very much still in kind of an orthopedic way. You can still think about it a little bit in that sense too. So ideally, I would love to do pelvic health. That is kind of my next journey of life. Once I take, a major course here to get kind of my level 1 certification as a PTA, which luckily I can do that, which I found out from Dr. Ketzler here. I want to continue on really specializing in that because my clinic, my community in general, we're considered rural. We have a population of maybe 25,000, which isn't huge, but it's not small by no means. And we have no pelvic health therapists anywhere within 30 mile radius is probably the closest to the next biggest town. And so that's something I would love to bring to the area. I talk with my friends and they're already like, what tips can you give me? What can I do? And I'm like, I need to do it. I would love to bring it to the community. I love to be a leader. I want to be someone who people can reach out to. So that is my next major step. I'm return back to my clinic. I will just move up into a PT role, which I've been super grateful for, the people at my clinic have been so supportive with me and my journey and working with me in hours and stuff so I can still work. So I want to give back to them. So I'm hoping I can, keep my pediatric position. That is the other half of my job that I dearly love. So I'm hoping after I graduate, I'll kind of be a half and half pelvic health and pediatrics, which definitely tie hand in hand. I work with a lot of young little babies and their moms, and if I could kind of bridge those gaps in my community and be that face for both, those little ones when they come out of the womb and the moms to help rehab both of them, that's my goal.
It's so funny you bring that up. I was just talking to an OT who specializes in pediatrics, but she said, Andrea, I need to learn more pelvic health because not only just for the moms, but for pediatrics, the need for pelvic health in pediatrics is growing. So, yeah, I can see that being an amazing service to your community. Fantastic.
Yes, I'm hoping so. We don't have a ton of physical therapy clinics here, 2 or 3. So we all kind of have our niches already. And like that's enough to pass around the clinic or around the community. So I can't wait to bring that to Hastings because like they said, we don't really have any of that. And it is such a high need. So I'm super excited to get into that.
That's awesome. Good. Keep going with it. You mentioned leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so glad you did because I have to tell you that student leadership is often at the forefront of conversations in PT education that I've been part of. But for whatever reason, I don't think there's many opportunities for students to jump into that leadership role. What are your thoughts on that from a student perspective?
I would agree. Unless you really kind of want to get into that legislative kind of businessy side of things and advocacy. We have been introduced to that in PT school, which is awesome. And if you want to go kind of on that policy side of things, I think there are some opportunities, at least that I've been presented with. But other than that, not a ton. Like PT students graduate, we see a ton, we get lot of students at our clinic, and most of them just go out and they get their job and they just hang out there. And, if that's okay with you, that's okay with you. But we need those students that are willing to rise, whether that's during their clinical rotations, whether that's in school, whether that's after school. And I have been a part of what we call Leadership Hastings. So I was inducted into that about 3 years ago. I spent a year traveling the businesses here in town, learning about the community and being a face of PTSR to bring what we have to the community, but also listening to what the community has to bring to us. So I thought that was a great leadership opportunity and really spiked my interest in wanting to be a face in Hastings that can make a difference for what our community deserves. So other than community leadership, I have not been exposed to a ton of leadership in the student role, which is frustrating. I am the president of our class, and I thought maybe that would bring me a little bit more of that leadership role being in that position, but it hasn't been a ton, and no fault to my PT school by no means, but there's not a ton there, and we need to stand up, and someone just needs to start being the leader. And hopefully I can bring something that at least to my surrounding communities.
Yeah, I agree. And this is no fault of a school, but it's something that I think even the APTA has been trying to really push forward. I noticed there's the student SIGs out there for each chapter, and even trying to get participation is a challenge. And I think it's because students are just, their schedules are filled to the gills. And let's be honest, your workload, I could speak for myself 20 years ago, PT school was a lot of work. I don't know if I had the energy to push forward and find those leadership opportunities, let alone take them. So tell me a little bit about your transition from clinic as a clinical practitioner who then has to jump back into the books. What was that like? Because I have to tell you, I have talked to so many PTAs who say, I want to go back, but Andrea, I'm scared. I don't know if I can handle it. Can you shed some light on your experience?
Yeah, definitely. My experience, I suppose, started with my bachelor degree. I didn't entirely know what I was getting into with that bachelor degree. It was brand new. I was the first or second class in it. It was hybrid kind of in a sense, but it was also during COVID, so it was a little bit of messed up there. But with that, we had to be working full time as a PTA. So I was working full time as a PTA, taking my night classes as in my bachelor degree program. So I think that kind of started my transition, which is essentially why I chose a hybrid program for PT school. But it was tough. That first bachelor degree program that I was in it was a lot, working all day long and then having to have that mental strength to like go home and sit down and watch my lectures and do my book work. It was tough. But at that point, I had already just fallen in love with physical therapy, that I saw it not as a chore. It wasn't something I had to do at night. It was something I really wanted to do. Sure, maybe some classes weren't my favorite. I'm not an inpatient cardio specialist by no means. So some of those classes were tough.
Sorry, Dr. Garavito. I have to say that.
But and he knows that well. We've had this conversation. But oh gosh, so those some of those classes are, you just put your head down and you grind through them, because in the end, you're going to make a difference. So you just got to persevere through that and really fall in love with what you love to do, and find that little specialty that you really enjoy. And I know that can be tough for PTAs who have been out for a little bit and finding something, because maybe their thoughts of going back is because they're burnt out and that love isn't always there anymore. So trying to reflect back in yourself why you went into PT in general in the first place. And I think I did a lot of self-reflection, especially through COVID. And is this really what I want to do? Do I really love it? And why do I love it? So I think a lot of self-reflection was what got me through it for sure. And so then when I got to my DPT program, I was ready to tackle anything and everything. Even cardio, I was like, okay, I'll keep my mind open. Like maybe this will be a little bit different, or maybe what can I learn and what can I take back to the orthopedic world? understanding the transition from, their hospital stay into like my outpatient clinic. So I saw it more as a opportunity for growth and learning rather than this is just something I have to get through.
I love that. An opportunity for growth. That's inspiring. Do you have any other resources for inspiration? I will tell you that especially when you have a license and you go through another program, those low moments, at least for me, speaking for myself, it was easy for me at times to say, you know what? Is this worth it? And I could just be an OT. I don't really need to stick with PT school. This is a lot of work because it was a lot of work. And
Yeah.
I have to admit, I'm going to date myself, but Patch Adams saved me from quitting PT school a couple times. That was my inspiration when I was going through those low points. What was what has been your inspiration or any resources you could share with the listeners?
I feel like I have two big ones. First, my family and friends, they don't always understand what you're going through because if you're not, in the medical field, in physical therapy specifically, they will never completely understand what you're going through with books and tests and practicals but having them as an outside source to lean to for a pick me up and to kind of get a mental break from school to be able to have that work life balance, that was one of the big things that kept me in check for sure, especially through PT school. I think honestly, the second part, being a PTA, I was sharing my story all the time with my patients, and they are so invested. They are like, "Where are you at now? What classes are you taking now?" And they were excited for me, which made me excited for myself. So I think that is something that is big. So whether you're a PTA listening or just a future PT, find that person that motivated you into wanting to be a physical therapist or go into PT. If I was talking about this before PTA school, it'd have been my grandma. She was someone that was like, this was so cool. Like little teenager me was like, can I go to therapy with my grandma? So keeping that mindset and finding those outside sources that keep you excited is something that's kept me going.
I love that. Family and a good support system, even if it's not family, just finding your cheerleaders. They're going to help you out. Touching on the same point, you being a healthcare professional, you've probably experienced burnout. That's the big topic these days. But what's interesting is I jump on DPT students' Facebook pages and I'm reading where students are in their final year
Mm-hmm.
and they're in clinical
Mm-hmm.
and they're burnout and they're already looking for a new avenue
Mm-hmm.
outside
Mm-hmm.
of physical therapy.
Yeah.
I hear that. I see that. What is it like on the inside? Can you speak to your perception of burnout as a PT student? Is it real?
I think it is very real for students that don't always have the clinical background that, for my personal experience, the experience that I have. I sometimes occasionally day to day, I might have burnout. If I had 15 straight patients in the clinic, that can be mentally tough. But if you look at each patient and case individually and how you're making a difference in their lives, I try to take a step back every day and be like, okay, this is not just a total knee and a shoulder replacement and this, that, and the other. That's not just the structure that I'm trying to fix here. This is a person's life. I am changing their life. I am advocating for them that physical therapy is what, they need that extra step to get back to golf this summer or whatever it may be. I look at it and I didn't come to this realization probably until about the past year. Now that I'm, my really tough part of PT school was over with. I'm like, you know what? I'm making a difference in these people's lives and I'm going to go out in clinical and I'm going to make an even bigger difference because now I can do it. I'm not just staring at a textbook and thinking about what I can do. I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. And I think that's something that has helped my personal burnout tremendously, for sure, for sure. So I think it is real because a lot of PT students with the traditional route don't have that experience. They don't have those patients to connect with. Maybe they weren't PTAs, maybe they weren't techs at all. They just have found the love of the program. And so here they are and they don't have patients or anyone to relate to in that sense. So I think it can be real and it can be tough, but trying to find that inspiration in your patients, I think is a big thing. Why are you doing this? Look at the big picture.
Yeah. And I was having a conversation with another healthcare professional who's been practicing for over 25 years. And they were talking about the importance of programs that students are coming from, be it OT or PT, that servant leadership needs to be at the forefront for students to recognize that their purpose in the clinic is, first and foremost to help others. You ask people why they become physical therapists or occupational therapists, and the first thing they say is because I want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
But caregiver burnout is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, Dr. Garavito and I had Ricky Fernandez, and he's a burnout coach, physical therapist, and he specifically is working with healthcare providers. And he said that he felt we need to start burnout training, how to reduce burnout in school, really,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to mitigate that. And he was sharing that he felt values were part of the challenge and also boundaries. If you're too much of a servant leader, now you're just available all the time. You still have to have those boundaries. So I guess my question to you as a student is when you're in that situation where you feel, and this is kind of hypothetical because you go out in clinicals starting in May, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you would have the confidence to have that boundary, the ability to place a boundary where there might be some, I don't want to call it abuse, but just that kind of healthcare systemic abuse, we'll say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think with my 6 years of practice, it has given me that confidence to say no. We kind of discussed what are my top 3 things that I could give to PTAs or PTs, just my top 3 things of advice. And that was the first thing I wrote down, the ability to say no. Protect your mental health at all costs. Just a side example, one of my big things is I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. If I have a big test, if I have a podcast on Saturday morning, you won't find me going out on a Friday night. I'm getting my 8 hours of sleep, and I have found that ability to say no. And that doesn't just pertain to your friends, that pertains to your family. They don't quite understand unless they're in the medical field and have gone through medical training and or PT school. They just don't entirely understand what you go through. And it's tough, and you have to have that confidence to say no. Coming out of PTA school, felt the burnout immediately. I was like, well, I need a job for this bachelor program I want to be in, but wow, I am exhausted from PTA school, and it's only a 2-year program, and I was already exhausted. But working my way through PT school, that is one of the biggest things I have learned for my own mental health is to say no. That would be the top advice I give anyone entering PT school, entering clinical rotations. And that's not saying you can say no to everything, because you can't. We are still there to learn. You are still there to push through and finish that degree. But to an extent, it is okay to say no. And you have to come to terms with that on your own before you're going to be able to portray that to other people, especially your CI.
It is true. And I've had CIs in the past, being an OT and a PT. And you as a PTA PT student, you will have multiple clinical experiences. So you have a little bit of experience to gather your perceptions on as well.
Yeah.
Your peers, they haven't been in that situation yet.
Mm-mm.
So for me, I had clinical instructors, PT or OT, who had me work 60 hours a week. And the rule at my programs were you work when your CI works. And honestly, a lot of clinicians work long hours. When you're not working and getting paid, I'm sorry, when you are doing a clinical and not getting paid, maybe that's a barrier, I think, for students
Yes.
because they want to learn. They would love the extra time to learn. But the truth is, they also might have a job. And so I know my previous experience as a director of clinical education was I mitigated that for my students because I was in that situation and wanted to make it clear that students only get 40 hours in the clinic. If they want to do more, fine. But I had so many students call me and say, I'm in this situation. They're making me work 50 hours a week. I have to get to, work. And, I understand, but what is the typical 40-hour week? So in some ways, I guess I love that you have that experience to say, listen, these are my hours. This is what I need. But my finding is that you're right. Your peers who don't have that experience, they're going to have a harder time with those boundaries. And that's where you need to lean on your clinical education person for that support. What other pieces of advice do you have for your peers?
Okay, so besides that being number one, time management was huge. Definitely, I played volleyball partially while in PTA school, so I had to time manage there, and then that really helped me excel through my life. I was able to, I'm a type of person, I don't like saying no. I want to go, I want to go coach this volleyball tournament or take this team on, and I want to go. I'm sure I'll help this extra patient, after hours. Like I'm here to help people. I want to do that. That's my passion of life. But owning that time management makes a huge difference. Find your organizational skills. Know what works best for you before you put yourself, on that sink or swim boat. So I think that's my next piece of advice is lay out your schedules, have visuals if you need to. It's what I teach in the school system. Use your visuals, that's a different part of learning. And really write out what you have time for and what you need to use that no factor for. So that is probably my second piece of advice. No factor, time management, and then third, not least, but definitely important, a good support system, family or friends. That's how I got through it. They took my mind off of, I'm sitting at my desk grinding through school for 8 hours on a day. We're going to go and play, pick up volleyball, or we're going to go do something fun. Like you got to get your mind off of it for a little bit. So having that support system that takes no for an answer when you have to say no, but is there for that yes when you say yes.
Yeah. And I think it's also believing in yourself that, I think people perseverate on studying because there's a lack of confidence. And that could also be something that you're bringing to this conversation as a PTA because you've been through that high level stress, the practicals before. And so I love that you're saying you're giving this advice to your peers because that is so important for them to one day have to figure it out on their own to some degree. But for you to hear, it's going to be okay, right? Like you still need to take that break. You'll do better if you take a break, rest your brain.
Definitely. And I was told that, a lot in PT school. I was like, I understand the nerves and I understand the buildup to all these practicals and how stressful it can be, but it's going to be okay. Like we have sat here for hours studying. You're going to be okay. Like you got this. I was the terrified little 18-year-old right out of high school in PTA school. I was this nervous wreck all the time. So it's been really cool to transition. I had an older girl in my PTA class was my mentor, and I went to her and I clung to her for all those moments. I look back at it now and I love being her. I love being able to step into that role for those that don't have as much experience as I do. That was one of the funnest parts of being in PT school for my perspective was being able to be that sounding board for sure and build that confidence in my classmates.
That's awesome. So you're leading right perfectly into my discussion about mentorship. What is a mentor to you? How would you define that?
I think it's sometimes I look at it very basic. A mentor is someone I am comfortable to go reach out to at any reasonable time of the day and ask any question at all. And they will give me a straightforward answer because we have that rapport built, we have that relationship built that, if I have a silly idea, they're going to tell me. If I have a great idea, they're going to motivate me to keep going down that path. And if I just have questions, they're going to give their perspective. And I think that's what a mentor is to me. And that's when I try to mentor other students or I coach volleyball, mentor my kids. That's what I want to be. I want to have that relationship. You still have boundaries, of course, but being comfortable enough that you can share perspectives, ideas, ask questions, and not feel judged. I think that is the biggest thing.
I love that. I agree. I think you need to feel comfortable, have some sort of relationship with that person. We had Dr. Richardson and Kyra Gause on earlier talking about mentorship. And one thing that came up is there's a difference between a coach and a mentor. And Kyra Gause said, a coach, they're going to coach you to the finish line. There's an end.
Yep.
But with a mentor, they're going to walk with you.
Yes.
I thought that was one of the best ways I've ever heard the description and difference between a coach and a mentor.
Yeah.
Do you see opportunities, maybe back to the leadership discussion we had, do you see opportunities for students in healthcare professions to be mentors for other students? Because the reason why that came to mind for me was when you shared that you had a mentor who was in a class above you in PTA school. Was it PTA or PT?
PTA. Yep.
That's
PTA.
what I thought.
Yep.
So do you see that as a benefit and a potential opportunity, would you learn from another student? I guess that's my thought.
Yep. 110%. You know, she came in, I, she was a few years older than I was. She had a bachelor degree already, came back to PTA, found out that was her love. And although she didn't have any physical therapy experience more than I did, she was someone that just had a few more years of life experience. And she understood that, you know, we're in it together and I'm going to help you through. And it's not that, you know, I'm older, I'm more experienced, I'm better than you. It was like, I'm going to take your hand and we're going to do this. Like, we're going to do this together. And I, you know, not speaking from her perspective, maybe she saw the same thing in me. And, you know, she was my mentor. And I have told this story many times before. And maybe I was that for her and I have no idea, but she was definitely that person that, you know, helped me through, whether it was just life, whether it was school. So I definitely think students can be mentors. I would say my relationship with a few of my best friends in PT school, that's our relationship too. Like, I can lean on them, they can lean on me. We see each other as mentors in different aspects. You know, I might have a little more orthopedic knowledge, but they might be better in something else. So leaning on each other or leaning on, the classmate above, you know, that's 100%, I think, something that we can use and more people should use. Like, after you get into PT school, you know, it's not a fight anymore. You're not fighting anyone to be higher grades. You're not trying to apply and be better than the next person. Like, we're all on the same playing field now. Like, be there for each other, you know, mentor each other in what you feel is something that's your highlight versus their highlight, you know, use that, bounce off each other. I think that 100% students should be mentors to each other.
Courtney, I think that your future is going to lead you into becoming an educator. And I hope you consider that down the road because you have wonderful leadership abilities and vision, which
Thank
is
you.
what we need more of in PT education. I love this whole discussion today because it's about looking to the future and making things better.
Mhm.
And we need more discussions like that. I hope you'll come back and talk to me because
Yeah.
I am so excited for your future and to hear what happens after graduation because I think you're going to go far.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
really appreciate your time.
Yes, of course.
I hope that you will feel comfortable to come back because you have a lot more to share.
Of course. Of course. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I've had such a blast.
Absolutely. We're so grateful. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you for joining us on the Iconic Scholar podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue the conversation, don't forget to connect with us on social media as @ScholarNetics360. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And remember, always consult with a healthcare professional for medical advice. Until next time,